What happens when a society's complacency leads to its potential destruction? What are the consequences when pacifism and brutality collide? Can intellect, psychological strategies, and maybe just a little bit of magic save us? Let's enter the world of fantasy author Peter Gribble. In his The City of Magicians series, readers find a pale blue 5 written on a crier pillar, and it looks kind of like this bony hand, but it's actually a clue of what is to come. You're going to meet an array of characters who must each rise to the threat of a barbaric invasion. There's Shone, Sass, Lalia, and more. And they each embody different approaches to solving problems, everything from diplomacy to espionage. Now, Peter Gribble is also a magazine writer. He has studied experimental psychology as well as education, and he is a lifelong student of history who spent many years working in a bookstore. Peter, hello. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Desiree. Nice to be here.
Let's dive in. I want to talk about the dangers of complacency because that's a major theme in your book. Can you help introduce us to 9-year-old Peter? What was that moment like that impacted you so much?
When I was 9 years old, I was in the fields of Normandy during the in the War Memorial, and surrounded by thousands of little white crosses stretching to the horizon. And something struck me deeply, profoundly, that this was wrong.
I bet that was a really auspicious moment. And growing up in France, what was it like being surrounded by some of the other children at that time, German children? What was that like?
It was very interesting. I went to an international French school where there were quite a few nationalities. But on day one, my mother said, there was a war, Germany lost. That's all you need to know. You do not discuss it. But the German kids were quite reclusive. They did not fraternize. There was a general sense of depression around them. And our best friends were the Dutch, who, when they discovered, you're Canadian, Canadians had liberated Holland. And so.
Yeah, it just seems like it had to be such a moment. We don't really think about the aftermath of the war and how it affected children, and then how it, in many ways, inspired you and inspired the City of Magicians, and just how that silence and that, kind of tucking things into the corner was an impact on the book. Could you talk a little bit about why you feel that a society that leans towards pacifism, when it's under siege, talk about how that makes a compelling story?
Well, if you start with a nonviolent point of view, you don't consider military alternatives. You just think, well, perhaps we are superior enough that our approach will be sufficient. In the City of Magicians, they do have a plan. It could work, but they discover that there's an underground movement plotting to collaborate with the same barbarian for their purposes. So they're not unified. When I came back to North America, I studied Mahatma Gandhi's pacifistic approach to things, which eventually worked. They did get rid of Britain, but at the same time, they were compromised. There was the Muslim population that wanted to have their own separate country, and it caused tremendous mayhem.
Yeah, and we think of MLK, Martin Luther King Jr. as well. And some of the ways that in the past we've used pacifism because it seems like the more noble, more civilized approach. But then to your point, it can be really difficult to keep in place when you're dealing with more barbaric forces and people that want to infiltrate and overtake a society. And another thing that you have, this theme in your book, is how knowledge can be used and it can be as dangerous as any weapon. Can you explore that a little bit for us?
Yeah. It could be also a subset of the pacifist approach that it worked with the British, who had inherently a sense of fair play, but not sure it would be effective against the Nazis. When you take a look at the pacifism of the Jews that walked into the gas chamber.
Mm,
So knowledge and unity and purpose can help you contest a barbarian approach or a bullying approach, but you should be unified.
yeah. And you bring up a really poignant image too. There were many Jewish folks who walked willingly into the gas chamber because they were compliant. They were going along with it. There was this sense of, I don't want to be disruptive. And that led to their unfortunate demise. It kind of makes one think about the world that we live in now. And also, in the world that you've created, magic is playing a really big role. Can you talk about magic in your
Sure.
books?
It's the magic that you and I and everyone else actually experience on a day-to-day basis, except we're not always alert to it. We have those moments where we enter a crowded room and we think, oh, I'd much rather not be there. And then someone enters and gets, oh, that person's, they're mine, I'm theirs, that's it. And you end up being married for 40 years. And it's those little moments of awareness and connection and seemingly serendipity. And if you take a look, if you examine yourself, you'll begin to realize reality is obliging and there are no accidents.
Yeah, I've always been struck by some of those synchronicity moments where two things just kind of match and line up, and just the perfectness somehow. When you think back, it's like, oh, kind of to your point, two people walk into a party at the same time, they connect, and what if one of them had gone to a different party that night? What if this would
Yeah.
have happened? And it just kind of makes you wonder, do things happen for a reason? And I'm curious. Talk about magic then in our real world. Do you believe that there are moments
Oh,
of magic?
absolutely. If you, I can see it, I wouldn't say every day, but if you pay attention, it's exactly that. What drew you to that party? You realize, oh, I don't want to go. And then someone says, oh, come on. Or you miss something and you delay your approach. And just because you missed 15 minutes, only then do things coalesce and connect. And you just say, my goodness, if I hadn't have left my bag and I had to go back for it. I saw someone do that just recently where they had to go back and pick something up, delayed something, and then met someone that they hadn't seen in years because of that very moment of delay. That's magic. It's actually far more prevalent and common. And but in the city of magicians, they understand this, and when they make things, when they become more clear in their intents and purposes, then they begin to see how reality obliges.
Ooh, I like that. Reality obliges. I know another thing that you've done is you're a fan of and you read a lot of historical memoirs, and that's informed a lot of your world building. Can you tell us how that all comes together?
Oh yeah. Um, the premise starts with that wonderful saying, "Truth is stranger than fiction." In which case, go to truth. So I've studied history and memoirs of the people, usually in the past, and so things like Napoleon's invasion of Russia was very admirably um, related by the memoir of Count Philippe Paul de Segur, Segur, and he was with Napoleon as he waded into Russia. And it was his observations were clear-headed and insightful. He, uh, he remarked several times on how Napoleon would say, as disaster unfolded, the chessboard, I can't see the chessboard. And I can't see, it's not there. As battles became inconclusive and he approached Moscow, it was a common theme. And I thought that was a very interesting observation of his, that Napoleon was seeing this as a chessboard where the opponent was not sitting down on the opposite side of the table.
Does that strategic thinking play a role in the City of Magicians?
Oh, yes, very much. Because as they discover there's an opposition, underground opposition, how do they try to get it to expose itself, emerge, so that it can be um, counteracted or sent into what they call contemplative confinement, which is a nice, cute way of saying um, prison. Except they assume that people can wake and resolve their issues. So it's not really a prison. It's sort of like going off to a nunnery or a monastery, and you have to think about your actions and your motivations.
Can we talk about the characters that readers meet in the City of Magicians? Let's start with Lilia. Can you talk about her journey and who she is and the situation she finds herself in?
Yeah. Lilia was a fascinating character. She was very reluctant to emerge. Took me, took her or me 6 months for her to emerge, including her name. I knew there was someone there, but and what finally when she did, then a whole number of things went click, 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 deep into the rest of the series. But she is immediately coerced in chapter 2 into this underground movement because she's in a search for her lover's lost manuscript, and she gets ensnared. And she plays a very pivotal role that is quite surprising, even to me, when I was writing it.
Isn't that great when your characters surprise you and all of a sudden it's like, there they are. It's like they come walking into the rooms. They're 6 months late, but they come in and then things just kind of fall into place.
Oh yeah, and then it's easy. As opposed to another character who I knew even before I started writing the book. Her name is Glesvia,
Mm-hmm.
and she doesn't play too much of a role in book 1, but she's an astronomer who measures the sky with her fingers and her fists, and
Mm-hmm.
you can put 18 fists into the night sky, starting if you have level horizons.
Mm-hmm.
And I suspect, well, he also mentions that you can put 36 fists into the entire elliptic, which I have sometimes thought, is this where we got 360 degrees in a circle? Anyway, she was there from the very beginning.
That's kind of neat because, yeah, if you did the fist,
Yeah.
it would.
Boop, 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 boop. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 18 fists if your horizons are level. But if you follow the elliptic through the year, you realize, oh, 36 fists fit. Yeah, I mean, if your fists are of a relative standard, they fit rather neatly into the elliptic. So
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
memorizing the skies as one of her ambitions. But she wants to go south to memorize skies that she's never seen.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. Can we talk a little bit about this intersection? Because you yourself have studied education, psychology, and you kind of pull that all together in your storytelling. Can you talk about some of the things that you've learned as not only somebody who's gone through, who has a lot of degrees, congratulations on those, but as somebody who's also a lifelong educator? I believe that you take some advice from Socrates, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yes. I've rather failed in taking the advice, but Socrates, I've studied memory techniques and I was doing some interesting research on that. But one of the things I came across was Socrates said, to keep your memory sharp, write nothing down. The moment you write something down, you will begin to forget and rely on writing. And as a writer, that has certainly become true. But during my studies, it was very interesting how you can memorize. Anyone can learn to memorize an item of a list of 30 items backwards and forwards, and with under 5 minutes. It's rather dazzling, and it can be useful. You don't have to ever write down a shopping list if you have these prearranged memory techniques in practice. It does require practice. It's like a muscle. And the more you practice, the more you can easily recall things.
That sounds painful. My brain hurts just thinking of trying to memorize 30 things. I can't even remember where I put my glasses half the time. So that's really cool. And you know, and you can apply speed reading techniques too, right?
Oh, yep, that was an interesting thing to learn. I took several courses in speed reading, It is without a doubt very effective. You can read things very quickly, and over practice, you can increase the amount of recall. And I was up to about 90%, but it's exhausting, and it actually robs the pleasure of reading. Um, so if you're trying to read the whole thing of War and Peace, but have you enjoyed it?
Mhm.
So I no longer advise speed reading. If you are studying for an exam, speed reading indicates that you have not pre-read stuff in the previous weeks and months, but your last minute cramming will be exhausting.
So it sounds like it's really good if you're a student and you need to study for an exam. But then does it hang with you? Can you recall then something from 10 years ago, or is it something that doesn't necessarily hang with one?
It's something that you do have to keep fresh, without a doubt.
Mm. Yeah.
Like memory techniques. If you're sort of doing a dazzling thing, of memorizing a list of 30 items, I've forgotten it the next day. Um,
Yeah.
so it's
That's
something that you do need to exercise and maintain. Um, and exercise. It is sort of like a muscle.
Yeah. It's amazing what the brain can do and can't do because again, when I think of doing that, all I do is, oh my God, I can already feel my brain being exhausted. I often feel, Peter, like I have so much bandwidth. This is it. It's finite. It has a limit. And every day I can only use so much of it. And when I think of, oh, if I had to memorize 30 things, then I wouldn't be able to do all of these other things. So, yeah, to your point, it does seem like it's a muscle and something that we can tap into if we want to and need to. But to your point, don't you want to enjoy reading something? Don't you want to enjoy experiencing something and maybe holding parts of the brain for some of the things that are, I don't know, a little bit more pleasurable?
Yeah, but bring pleasure to your memories and,
Yeah.
and make it an exploration.
Now, you used to work in bookstores for many years. Can
Yes.
you, yeah, can you talk to us about that? What was that like?
I worked in bookstores in Montreal, Toronto, and here in British Columbia, and it was a wonderful way to link people up with books that they were looking for, or books that you would assume that they would enjoy. I had a wonderful manager in Montreal who had an amazing ability. He had a distinct following. He could find books specific to people's interests and preferences. Although there was in that particular bookstore, we had an interesting event. The owner had contacts in England, and he was able to get the first bookstore in North America to get a copy of Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses, and it was. It was banned and it was forbidden. But we had a fairly large Iranian population in Montreal, and they wanted a copy of it. It was so notorious, and but we had to set up individual appointments for pickup, and every book was in a brown paper bag, and you had a window of 15 minutes for each person. The bookstore did very, very well in the end, when I talked to the Iranians who had bought the book, some of them had never finished it. It was too confusing. And others said, oh, what the heck was the fuss all about?
That's amazing because yeah, we all know what happened to Salman Rushdie, even like recently because of his writings and the Satanic Verses were very famous at the time. So it's really interesting that the people that it was supposed to be kept from were
Right.
kind of like, not that big of a deal after
Yeah,
all.
exactly. The
Yeah.
story is basically about the diaspora's existence in Britain, more than anything dangerously theological.
Yeah. It just, and it goes to show us though, um, about the power of books, the power of the written word. All of that has so much meaning. I know too, one of the things we mentioned early on is you've written for gardening magazines as well. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, I worked part-time, 25 years at a garden center, a fairly major one here in British Columbia. And one of the reasons I worked there was to provide research material and material for the columns. The interesting thing about writing for magazines is that there are usually distinct word counts that you are required. 1,200 words has to be in by Friday. Um, because I wrote good copy, I usually got extra days because the editors usually didn't have to edit me. They just, oh, Peter, you got an extra day. But yeah, working in I have a long love of gardening, I have a big backyard, and so it's not particularly well arranged because it's more of a collector's garden. When I worked at the store, I would find an interesting plant to say, "Oh my goodness, what is this?" So I plant it, and then I could write about it. But it looks
And
peculiar in certain landscapes. Sorry.
yeah, and it shows. I mean, right now we have Threat, which is book one in your book series. You have three books in the book series. So,
Yeah.
as a writer and somebody who's put together this amazing award-winning fantasy book series, what advice or tips do you have for other writers?
Um, write every day. And just because you have a journal is not writing. You can do both, um, but write every day. And if you get stuck, um, read some more. Read something. Pick up a book and read it. Doesn't matter what it is. That active disengagement that allows a breathing space for whatever creativity is waiting to come through. And listen to your characters. I find that sometimes characters will just say, I want to say something, and you better write it down. And because those are wonderful moments of surprise and just, oh my goodness, the chapter goes in a direction you did not think, and it's so much better than what you had planned, more often than not.
It's amazing how many writers I run into and they're not really readers. So I think that's excellent advice. I'm curious, Peter, what are you reading right now?
Um, I'm rereading the memoirs of the Duke of Saint-Simon, who wrote during the latter part of the court of Louis XIV and into the Regency that followed. Um, Very interesting observations. The petty intrigues were all over the place. Um, a curious thing about Louis XIV, he made his illegitimate children very high up in the court. They were just slightly below the legitimate children, but above all the peerages, all the aristocratic titles, which caused a great deal of resentment. And yet he tried to marry them off. The rest of Europe would have none of it. But within the court, the illegitimate daughter and the illegitimate son, who were given titles, of course, um, were married off by ambitious people in the court. Um, the other thing I'm reading currently right now is also Salman Rushdie's The Moor's Last Sigh. And unlike the speed reading days, I'm reading this slowly and carefully because the language is extraordinary.
And I know that you've drawn some inspiration from some classics too. Can you talk about how Isaac Asimov might have influenced The City of Magicians?
Oh, yes. I'm very interested in the way societies evolve, and his Foundation series was one of the high points in that genre. And one of the lines that he has, which I has stuck with me ever since, was "Violence is the last refuge of the incompetent." I just thought, oh wow, I like that. So, and
Yeah, and
similarly, sorry.
that really that really drives home the point too of your books. That it really just pulls it all together. There's a line in Dune too that I believe you feel a little bit gypped over because it's been left out of the movies. What's that line?
Oh yeah, it's the very last line in the book, in book one of Dune. And it's when Paul has been vanquished his enemies and is now obliged to marry Princess Irulan to cement his um, uh, position on the throne. And Chani, the love of his life, is about to walk away. But his mother, Paul's mother, says, Chani, look at that princess. She will receive no look of devotion or love from Paul. Do you not know my son? Chani, we who carry the name of concubine, history will remember us as wives. And I just thought, ooh, lovely, powerful ending. And that's not in the movie. Poor old Channy runs off in sort of I don't know. It was a major letdown for me. It's such a powerful line. And anyway,
Is
yeah.
there a powerful line from your own books that you want to share with us?
Um, yeah, it's actually on the back cover. Sas and Lalia, yes, Sas and Lalia are pawns in the strategies of others, but it only takes a pawn to change the game.
I love that. I love that.
Thank
All
you.
right. Yeah, absolutely. What is it, Peter, that you want people to walk away with after reading Threat is book one? After reading Threat, like what do you want them to do? What do you want them to feel? What kind of experience are they in for?
Well, book one ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, and book two and three extends the story, but it's also perhaps an advice to be alert in your life and see the connections that are readily at hand. There's nothing really mysterious except our inattentiveness and our lack of awareness, which is accessible.
And that's where that complacency message
Yeah.
can come in. Yeah. Peter, tell folks where they can go to find out more about you, find you online, find your books.
Okay. My website is petergribble.com. You can buy the books on Amazon. If you live in Vancouver, you can also get them at the Chapters Indigo store on Robson Street. And yeah.
Excellent. Peter Gribble, the author of the City of Magicians series. First book in the series is Threat. Highly recommend it for fans of fantasy, political intrigue, society, psychology, and of course, just a little bit of magic as well. Peter, thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Desiree.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us as well on the Books That Make You show. You can find out more about us on our website. That is booksthatmakeyou.com, where you can find more amazing authors and books. You can also sign up for the Webby Award-winning Books That Make You newsletter. Remember, Books That Make You is the proud sponsor of the Book Fest. You can also check out thebookfest.com. It happens twice a year in spring and fall, and there's all sorts of free content. Conversations with authors, panel discussions with authors, and lots of fun. So go check out thebookfest.com as well. You can also follow on Facebook, Instagram. Please also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find all of the Books That Make You shows there, as well as all of the Book Fest programming. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are.